ராதே ராதே. நீங்க ஆரம்பிக்கிறீங்களா?
நான் சொன்னமா?
ஆரம்பிச்சிடலாம். ஒரே ஒரு செகண்ட் நகர். ராதே ராதே.
I will just share the Hari Om and pranams to everyone. Thank you for joining in today for the first lecture series of Bhagavad Gita. Before we start, I would like to offer my prayers. And so I have some of the prayers on this PowerPoint slide. So we will get started with that. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Satchidananda Rupaya Vishvotpatyadi Hetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Numaha. Akhanda Mandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Ajnanatimmirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We'll chant the Gita Dhyanam. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvam Anusantathami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshinim Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullara Vindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetamrudaduhe Namaha. Sarvopanishado Gavaha Dogdha Gopalanandanaha Partho Vatsasudhir Bhokta Dugdam Geetamrutam Mahat Vasudev Vasutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagat Gurum Bhishmatrona Jayatra Dajala Gandhara Nilotpala Shalyagrahavati krupena vahani karnena velakula Ashvathama vikarna ghora makara Duryodhana vardini Sotirna khalu pandavai rananadi Kaivatraka Keshavaha Parashatyavachas sarojamamalam Geetarthagandhotkatam Nanakhyanakesaram harikadaha Sambodhana bodhitam Loke satchana shatpadairaharaha Pepiyamanam muda Bhuyat bharata pankajam kalimala Pradvamsina shreyase Mukham karoti vachanam Pangum langayate girim Yat kripa tamaham vande Paramananda madhavam Yam brahma varunendra rudra marutaha Stunvanti divyaistavaihi Vedai sanga padakramopanishadaihi Gayantiyam samagaha Dhyanavastita tatkatena manasa Pashyantiyam yoginaha Yasyantam na vidhusura suragana Devaya tasmai namaha Sarvadharman parityajya Mamekam sharanam vraja Aham tva sarva papebhyah mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. I invoke the blessings of the entire Guru Parapara, starting from Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda, our beloved Guruji Swami Tejomayananda, our Mukhya Swami Swami Swarupananda, my own Acharya Swami Bodhatmananda, and our own Acharya Shardaji. I would like to thank Sridharji and the Balaji Temple of Great Lakes for hosting this series. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to attend this first session of Bhagavad Gita. Depending upon the time zone, it's probably either quite late or maybe it is quite early for you. And I'm sure most of you are very familiar with Bhagavad Gita. Nonetheless, since you're all serious sadhakas, it is important that I start at the very beginning, looking as to why we are studying this beautiful text, Bhagavad Gita. In the spiritual tradition, we have a convention, a technical term called Anubandha Chatushtaya. Anubandha Chatushtaya, which basically indicates the purpose of the text, which is given at the right of the beginning. We do have sometimes the same convention, even in our modern textbooks. For example, a high school chemistry book, we would find that the subject and the student group is listed right in the beginning. So, what is this Anubandha Chatushtaya which is applicable for Bhagavad Gita? Well, Anubandha Chatushtaya, as it indicates, it's 4 factors. It indicates first, for whom is this written? Why is Bhagavad Gita really applicable to us? Well, it is for that adhikari. Adhikari, who is the right student, for whom this Bhagavad Gita is necessary. So who is the right student? If you ask, well, all of us here are the right students, because we know that we have come to study this text because we feel that this text is going to reveal something for me, something which I find lacking in the outer world. Maybe it is a curiosity for some, but maybe it is something for some people where there is a deep yearning for attaining this eternal happiness, which we call as moksha or liberation. So today we have a lot of books, in the matter which we call this as for, say, PC repair for dummies and things like that. But sometimes these titles are given so that it attracts people's attention. So in that sense, the second aspect of Anubandha Chatushtaya, what is really the Vishaya here? The second one talks about the Vishaya, which is the subject matter of this text. The third one is Prayojanam, the purpose. What is in it for me? So what is the Prayojanam for me, which is laid out in Bhagavad Gita? And finally, the last one of the Chatushtaya of this Anubandha Chatushtaya is Sambandha. Sambandha, which is indicating the relation of the text, in this case Bhagavad Gita, to my purpose as to what is in it for me. So you see, that is why all of you have joined here today, to really see what is Bhagavad Gita going to speak to me. How is this going to fulfill my purpose in having an eternally happy life? So why Bhagavad Gita? If you think about it, Bhagavad Gita today, is it necessary? A text which was written about 5,000 years ago, as per the classic way of looking at age. If you look at Google says it's 5,160 years ago. But nevertheless, it is a text which has been called as a philosophical text, as a text of great merit in terms of academic excellence, in terms of a religious textbook. And some people even call this as a self-help book. Now, one may wonder, a text which is 5,000 years old, how can it be a self-help book? Well, that actually shows its relevance today in the 21st century, which is why we are talking about it today. You see, the world outside may have changed significantly from what it was 5,000 years ago. I mean, I can tell from the last 60 years, I know I've seen the birth of, at least I've seen things from no television to computers, to phones, to internet, to social media, and now even travel to the moon and even travel to the Mars. All these things are changes on the world outside. But what about the world inside? The world inside has not changed at all. It is still the same. It is that same mind which is torn apart by all kinds of feelings, whether it's jealousy, whether it is envy, or on the other sides, whether it is kindness and compassion, whether it is false hopes or doubts, grief, despair, all the old questions which hit somebody like Arjuna, who is the hero of this text 5,000 years ago, is still what we face today. Nothing has changed. The top 10 list, which is as part of our needs, say happiness. Do we have an answer for it? Not really. Money. Not good enough, not enough for me. Freedom. I don't have the freedom to show what my true purpose is. Peace. I have a lack of clarity of who I am and what my purpose in life is. Passion. How do I find the right role which evokes passion in me? What about balance? We talk about work-life balance, but balance as in balancing my needs with my flexibility. What about fulfillment? Not knowing how to utilize my potential in the best possible way. Stability, constantly trying to figure out what to do next. And finally, security, overcoming feelings of inadequacy and negativity. So if this top 10 list is not enough, we're always at crossroads trying to decide and sometimes confused as to what direction to take. Do I do this? Do I take this decision? Do I continue to stay? Do I leave? In many different things. And this doubt is such a phenomenal issue for us. It is an everyday experience with all these mini dialogues going in our minds, thinking of the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, even in simple things. Simple things like deciding what I'm going to cook today. All these things really plagues our mind. And on top of this, if this is not enough for us, we have certain uncertainties going on, things that we never expected would happen to us. So we are amid literally instability on steroids, right? So in the midst of all this is where Bhagavad Gita really comes into play. Bhagavad Gita has an answer for everything that we are facing, for all the issues. If we have this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, literally, we can understand truly what our needs versus wants are. We can really try to conquer some of the challenges that we face. We won't really become paralyzed by uncertainties. We might even find stability in the chaos and strengthen ourselves in all these uncertain times. So Bhagavad Gita offers this timeless wisdom. I had the good fortune to be able to listen to Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda in the early 80s, listening along with about thousands of people in the Ramakrishna Mission grounds in T Nagar. For those of you who are from Chennai, he was one of those early proponents of giving lectures of Bhagavad Gita in English so that this timeless wisdom can really reach huge masses of people. Bhagavad Gita was the breath of Swami Chinmayananda. And to me, it made a great impact even when I was in the 12th grade. It has had a powerful and lasting influence in the world. For Mahatma Gandhi, Bhagavad Gita was the eternal mother. For many Western writers and thinkers, transcendental philosophers like Thoreau and Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, they were all deeply influenced by his insights. So I want to give you a sample of how Bhagavad Gita has really can help in many ways in just a few of the shlokas that I want to take today with you. So one of the first things that Bhagavad Gita tells us is that always start with a calm mind before you take up any action, O Arjuna. In Shloka 248, for example, he says about yogastu kuru karmani taktva sangam taktva dhananjaya siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchate. And also end with a calm mind at the end of any action. And this evenness of mind will lead you to high levels of efficiency. Yoga karma sukaushalam. He also tells us, think always with a calm mind. He says, undoubtedly, O Arjuna, the mind, as we all know today, don't we? We know that really well. Our mind, if you let it loose, it can go haywire, right? So 5,000 years ago, Krishna tells Arjuna, the mind is restless. It's difficult to restrain, but it can be subdued by vigorous spiritual practice, such as meditation. And so persevere, and with detachment, you can conquer it, O Arjuna. Asamshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grikhyate. So very powerful words said those days, which holds so much good, and we can see the relevance even more so today. So the first step to gain this clarity in any situation, in order to be able to think and apply, is to develop a clear, calm mind, which takes a lot of effort. And that's what we can even see, for example, in this one movie called The Vantage Point. The protagonist, he replays the same series of events in his mind till he finally decodes the mystery. By distracting himself from the scene, he's no longer worried about his life and he can think objectively. So clarity of mind being so important in order to attach our focus on any action. Give up results. One of the most common, or one of the most famous shlokas from Bhagavad Gita, where you have control over doing your respective duty, but no control over our actions, no control over the results. The fruits of work should not be your motive, and you should never be inactive, which is karmanye vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. So most of our decisions get affected because we wonder about our outcome of our actions. But when I realize that I have little control over the final outcome, because my action is only one of the many which needs to happen in order for the action to bear fruit, then I recognize Krishna's words in my life in this whole scheme of action and reaction. Don't give in to stress in a world full of busyness and activity, with people snapping at each other, with road rage and intolerance. These words by Lord Krishna ring truer than ever today. The one by whom others are not agitated, and one who is not agitated by others, who's free from joy, envy, fear, and anxiety. Yasma no dvijate lokaha, loka no dvijate chayaha, harsha marsha bhayod vegayi, mukto yas sachame priyaha. From Bhakti Yoga, in chapter 12, Krishna tells Arjuna, don't try to do this. So try to be always helpful to everyone. And then be ready for change, Arjuna, when inertia is predominant. Ignorance, inactivity, carelessness, and delusion arise. What a beautiful shloka for students and children trying to get procrastination out of the way. Aprakasho pravrittischa pramado moha evacha tasmadyetani jayante vivritte kurunandana. from 14th chapter. And then adding change and excitement to your activities helps to give a boost. So whenever one slips from a lethargy, how can I pull myself? What beautiful shlokas here. Another one, act with conviction, from the 17th chapter, where Lord Krishna reminds Arjuna that whatever is done with faith, whether it is sacrifice or charity, austerity, or in this one it has no, only when we have faith can we actually can do things. And then leadership, such an important aspect which we can learn from Bhagavad Gita. Setting high standards for ourselves, because as Lord Krishna says, whatever noble people do, others follow. What a great leadership motto here. He doesn't talk about the fact that you follow the values. Of course, we talk about values in many different chapters, the chapters 13, the chapter 12, chapter 18, so many places we have discussion of values. But this one shloka says it all, where in order to be a leader, the test of a true leader is when others are following you. And to do that, one has to set up high standards. So once we have decided on a course of action to set up those standards of excellence and keep benchmarking our own success. So wise people do everything without any motive, and they remain equanimous in success and failure, pleasure and pain, joy and sorrow. And they work only for purification. Atmana Shuddhaye, very important. And they also act with the view of helping the community. Loka Sangraham, from chapters 12 and everything, and also from Shloka 3, from chapter 3. Teamwork, treat everyone equally. A person is considered superior who is impartial towards all kinds of people. They can be their friends or enemies, haters, relatives, saints. One who is impartial to everyone is a person who is superior. What a beautiful quality for teamwork. So there is so many things that we can learn from this, from Bhagavad Gita. And finally, in terms of security, since that was one of our top 10 lists, right? One of the things from there. To be secure, we must find the source of security within ourselves, says Lord Krishna in chapter 2. So this is one of the beautiful aspects in how I can be fearless. I don't have to worry about any kind of FOMOs, a fear of missing out, because security lies within me. And this is an assurance that Lord Krishna gives Arjuna. So you see, Bhagavad Gita is a complete manual. And in this digital age, it can be called as maybe the GPS or a roadmap in how I can structure my life to get the happiness that I am myself. And this is all done through the path of Karma Yoga, through the path of Bhakti Yoga, and through the path of Jnana Yoga. In terms of the Vedantic aspect of it, it conforms to the Mahavakya, Tat Tvam Asi, or that thou art. The first section of Bhagavad Gita talks about Tvam, or the self. The second section discusses about the Tat, or the ultimate reality. And the last section discusses about the relationship, the Asi, about a relationship between the oneness of the self and the ultimate reality. So Gita provides a practical methodology to realize the oneness of the individual self, Atman, and the Supreme Self. Swami Tejomayananda, during a course, talked about how that Sant Jnaneshwar had compared Durga Shaptasati with Bhagavad Gita. The 700 shlokas of Durga Shaptasati can be compared to the 700 shlokas of Bhagavad Gita in the sense that he compares Durga Devi to Bhagavad Gita Mata. Durga Devi killed one Mahishasura, Mahisha meaning a buffalo, and this Asura used to appear whenever he was required, and here the Asura signifies Tamoguna. And here we have countless jivas, and in each one of them we have this Mahisha or this Tamoguna which needs to be killed. And this Tamoguna is the one which acts as a moha and deludes our intellect. So the Gita, in other ways also, is one of the most translated book. It's one of the most commented upon book. There are so many commentaries that have been written and are continuously being written. In fact, I saw a couple of books already on Amazon which appeared last year as the God Song. So people are still continuously writing their own interpretations or what they have gathered as insights from Bhagavad Gita. In fact, a search on Amazon, it leads to about more than 1,000 results on Bhagavad Gita. And Yale University actually had a whole month-long course on Bhagavad Gita this past summer, where they were taking commentaries from everywhere, collecting them and analyzing through it. Another question that always comes to our mind is, what is the difference between Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam? Well, Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, while Srimad Bhagavatam is the story about Krishna, which is told by Shukdev Maharaj to Parikshit Maharaj, who was also going through a crisis by which he was going to die in 7 days and wanted to know the story of the Lord, Srimad Bhagavatam. Now one may ask, who is the author of Bhagavad Gita? The author of Bhagavad Gita is none other than the great sage Veda Vyasa. There is so much we can talk about Veda Vyasa ji, and I will be covering that when we do the Gita Dhyanam next week. Veda Vyasa ji is the one who compiled the Vedas. Now let's talk about the context of Bhagavad Gita. And what does it, the text and the context of Bhagavad Gita itself. So the Bhagavad Gita is, as probably you know, is a dialogue between Sri Krishna, the divine incarnation in human form, and his warrior disciple, Arjuna, on the eve of a historical battle. So within this Vedantic tradition of learning, things that we must be aware of also is Bhagavad Gita is part of the 3 big texts, which is also called as the Prasthana Trayi. The Prasthana Trayi, the Trayi meaning 3, the 3 are the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutra. The Upanishads are the Shruti, while the Bhagavad Gita is the Smriti, and the Brahma Sutra is called the Nyaya. So here we have that this Bhagavad Gita also sometimes it has the status of a Shruti or a scripture or a revelation. Now, Upanishads can be a little deep, and it does take a little bit of time to understand the Tatparya or the theme of the Upanishads. And then we have the Brahma Sutras, which can be also a little complex in terms of the Nyaya philosophy, the Nyaya arguments, the logical discussions that goes on with regard to the philosophy itself. But then Bhagavad Gita, because it comes right in the middle of the Upanishads, and the Brahma Sutra, it is a little more easier to understand. And that is probably why Vyasaji has constructed in such a simple manner so that people like you and I can understand it much more easily. In fact, all the Upanishadic truths are in the Bhagavad Gita. Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogda Gopala Nandanaha. One of the beautiful verses from Gita Dhyanam talks about this. So it is Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishad. So also at the end of every chapter, we end with Bhagavad Gita Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyam. So because it's in the middle, it talks about how we can, it blends the Upanishadic truths along with the Yoga Shastra. And it's the practical science really of experiencing the Brahma Vidya. So, and then it says it's Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade. So it's a dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. So that is about the significance, the Tatparya of Bhagavad Gita itself. But where does it really appear? I see one or two kids in the group, and I'm sure they will say, Auntie, it comes in Mahabharata. That's right. It does come in Mahabharata. And Mahabharata, as we know, is one of the two great epics. And Mahabharata has about 100,000 verses, of which Bhagavad Gita is about 700 verses. It comes in the Bhishma Parva of Mahabharata. And it is, as many of you know, and I'll probably just touch upon it briefly. And it is a story about the Pandavas and the Kauravas. The Pandavas are the son of King Pandu, and you have the 100 sons, the Kauravas, who are the sons of Dhritarashtra. And as we know, this is a story about the two branches of the royal family. And King Pandu was actually the king, and because King Dhritarashtra, even though he was the eldest, could not really rule because he was blind. But then King Pandu was cursed, and he had to go to the forest, and therefore the kingdom was then placed in the hands of Bhishma, who acted as a kind of regent and who took care of the children because King Dhritarashtra also could not rule. And therefore, all the Pandavas and the Kauravas were brought up by Bhishma. And they had an able teacher called Dronacharya, who educated them in the science of warfare. Now, as they were growing up, we could see Yudhishthira becoming strong and becoming an ideal heir apparent. On the other hand, we find the Duryodhana, who is very malicious and who's very wicked. And then pretty soon comes a time when Duryodhana plays a prank, and he tries to burn down the palace in which the Pandavas were staying. So then the Pandavas had to go into the jungles. When they heard about and when they were there, then they heard about the fact that there was going to be a Swayamvara of Draupadi, who was a beautiful princess. And so they go to the Swayamvara, and there Arjuna was able to win the competition, and he brings Draupadi along with his brothers back to the hut where Kunti was. And as we know, Kunti, when they tell Kunti from outside that they brought a prize, she says, well, you have to share the prize with everyone. And so Draupadi becomes the wife of the 5 Pandavas. And it is there that Lord Krishna, or Krishna at the time, Krishna comes there and blesses the Pandavas. And pretty soon, Yudhishthira comes back, and the blind king then agrees to give him half of the kingdom. And of course, I didn't explain about, he gives him half the kingdom, and then Yudhishthira builds this beautiful palace of Indraprastha. And the new builds a palace in Indraprastha. And then you see that Duryodhana gets very jealous of Yudhishthira, and he knows about Yudhishthira's weakness for dice. He calls him for a game of dice. And with his uncle Shakuni, Duryodhana kept winning over Yudhishthira by playing all kinds of tricks. And in one of them, he even tries to, Yudhishthira is forced to wage even Draupadi, and Draupadi is humiliated at that point. And pretty soon, then the Pandavas, along with Draupadi, are then exiled into the forest for about 13 years. And then when it is almost getting over, during the 13th year, then after it's over, they come back. They spend about 12 years in the forest, and the 13th year incognito. And then during this time, we see Krishna and Arjuna spending a lot of time together, discussing many different philosophical and religious matters. And when the 13th year finishes, after this long sabbatical, they come back and ask Dhritarashtra back for the kingdom. So Dhritarashtra gives that back to him, but then promises to give it back to them. But then Duryodhana, who really enjoyed this 13 years without having anyone around, refuses to surrender. And he says that I will not give you enough land, even which can be raised on the tip of a needle. So this now calls for the big Kurukshetra war. And we find that this war is inevitable. And so the Pandavas, they go to Kunti, Mata Kunti, and she gives them permission for the war. And pretty soon you see feverish preparations for the war happening. And at this point in time, when this was going on, Dhritarashtra sends Sanjaya to Arjuna with a secret message, which is full of psychological implications and some kind of auto-suggestions. Not a good thing to do, but he did that. And so Sanjaya goes and whispers this to Arjuna the day before it's going to happen, the war is going to start. And then we find that both Arjuna and Duryodhana, they go to Krishna for help. They both go at the same time, and Krishna was napping at that time. So Duryodhana, of course, wants to impress Krishna, so he goes and sits right next to him near his head, while Arjuna is a little more reverential, and so he goes and sits at the feet. And when Krishna wakes up, he sees Arjuna first, and he then sees Duryodhana also, and he asks, okay, what do you want? So Duryodhana immediately says that I want all your army and all your resources. And then Krishna says, okay, I'm there and I will help, or I'll help Arjuna. So Arjuna gets Krishna as a friend to help him, and Duryodhana gets all the resources and everything. So we will stop here and we will continue next week. So the format in how we are going to go through this lecture series is, next week I'll start with the Gita Dhyanam. It's a series of beautiful shlokas written by Madhusudan ji, which really exemplifies Bhagavad Gita. So we'll do that, and then we'll move on to chapter 1. In chapter 1, we'll probably not spend too much time, maybe 2 lectures at the most, 2 to 3 at the most. And then we are going to move on to chapter 2. As we go through Bhagavad Gita, My plan is to make sure that the shlokas are chanted well, and the meaning, the Sanskrit meaning of these shlokas will be presented to you. And through these shlokas, I'm hoping to present the practical relevance of these shlokas to our own lives. And along with that, if there is any stories or anecdotes that can be said along with that. So if anybody has any questions, my plan is to do this for 45 minutes to 50 minutes at the most, and then leave the next 10 minutes for questions. So I will stop here. If you have any questions, you may ask. And after that, we will complete. Once again, I want to thank all of you. And I want to particularly thank Sridharji for this opportunity that he has given so that we can study the Bhagavad Gita. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shantihi. Om purnamada purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnameva vashishyate. Om shanti shanti shantihi. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Thank you. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you.
Hari Om.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sunita ji. Hari Om.
Thank you. Hari Om.
Thank you, Sunita.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank you, Ji. Radhe, Radhe.
Thank you. Thank you, Sridharji.
Oh, namaste.
Thank you,
Very nice
Sunita ji. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jayashree.
Thank you.
Can I go ahead